Good evening, Taurus. We're going to go ahead and say a prayer, and then we'll go into our webinar for this evening. Most heavenly and gracious Father, we thank you, Lord, for this is a day that you have made, and we're going to rejoice and be glad in it, Lord. We just thank you, God, for allowing us the opportunity to come together again, God, to learn how to lead, but ultimately learn how to serve and serve all mankind, Lord. We just pray that everyone that has set aside their time tonight, Lord, that this webinar is beneficial, Lord, and they will continue to be effective in our sisterhood, Lord, and we will continue, Lord, to walk in the will that you have for our lives. We pray that all the presenters, Lord, will do well tonight, will speak effectively, Lord. We'll have good questions, Lord, and we'll be able to learn and grow and mature in the path that you have for our lives. We thank you and we praise you. In the miraculous name of Jesus, we do pray, and to God be the glory. Good evening, sorors. We just want to say thank you for taking out time out of your busy schedules in this inclement weather. I will now present to you our webinar for the evening, PTOU, Effective Communication with leading as an effective committee chairman. And the presentation will be presented by Sarah Erica Martin and Sarah Valencia Portier. I now pass it over to you. Thank you.
Good evening, Soars. I just want to make sure that you all can see my screen. Give me one moment. Sir Jolene, can you see my screen? The slideshow is not on the screen.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Your audio has been muted. Press star 6 to unmute your audio. Your audio has been unmuted. Press star 6 to mute your audio.
It looks like did Erica Martin?
All right, so sorry about that. Can you all hear me?
Sure, Erica, this is Sora Valencia. I can hear you. We just don't see the slideshow on the screen.
Okay, yes, and I think that was the result of, I think someone accidentally clicked on the slide share. So, Source, please don't click on the slide share, or else it'll take the permissions from me. Okay, so I think we are ready to start. Gotta love technology, right? So just a few housekeeping rules and just some few items to keep in mind. So for the attendance log, please enter your name into the chat message or email it to me, ericawmartin@gmail.com, so that we can keep a record of the attendees for today. You should have also received a document along with the invitation for today's webinar. Just a few items to keep in mind. Please turn your microphone off if you are logging in and using your phone for the audio, as well as on the computer. if you have a question, please feel free to enter it into the chat message, and I will do my best to monitor it, as well as Sora Valencia and Sora Jolene. So as we get questions, we will do our best to try to answer them. And then also, please make sure that you don't click the slide share. Not only will your desktop come for everyone to see, but it'll also take the PowerPoint away from everyone and it won't be visible. So just so we don't have any other delays, please keep those items in mind. Okay, so for today, we are talking about your role as chairman, co-chair, and perhaps you're serving in that role right now, or maybe you are serving on the committee and you're interested in taking on that leadership position. And so what I'm going to do to kick us off is I'm going to talk about the logistics and how you can reach your full potential in that role, and also just present an opportunity for us to maybe discuss barriers that we face as well as best practice. So I believe for us to really make this a good webinar, any questions, any thoughts, or best practices that have worked well for your team, if you want to share that, again, please put that in the chat box. Starting with roles and responsibilities, I'm going to cover meetings, committee activities, and reports. And so I'm going to go ahead and dive into it. So just briefly, I'm not going to read all of this to you all. You all know how to access our PTO bylaws. But one thing that I want to bring to your attention in regards to the expectation per our bylaws is a few things. First, in your role as chairman, it is important to remember that the first committee meeting for your group should be held by the end of January. This is to make sure that we get things going, that any needs that are there are presented in a timely manner. Also, all committee reports are due in writing, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And then also with that, you want to keep in mind that the committee chairman will present or submit a copy of that committee report to the individuals listed, so including our basilisk, first anti, second anti, our grabinist, Ivy Leaf reporter, historian, archivist. It's very important that you keep that in mind at chapter meetings, that you bring those copies. And if you have any barriers to that, make sure that you talk to your committee members or talk to someone on the executive board that can provide support. So now, meeting with your committee. So there are a few things that you want to keep in mind. Obviously, you want to make sure that in order to be an effective leader, that you communicate with your team. And I completely understand that sometimes we get so busy, it's a lot easier for us to take it on ourselves. But you certainly want to make sure that you communicate with your team the expectations. When you're meeting with your team, you want to be mindful of proper time management. For those who attend the Target One meetings, I can tell you that I am a huge believer in making sure that we start in a reasonable time and we end at a reasonable time. And so what has worked well for me is making sure that we limit our sidebar conversations or going off on tangents. I know it's great for us to catch up with one another, but in that moment, you are meeting to talk about what is needed for your committee. So you certainly want to keep that in mind. Also, relevant and productive agenda items. You want to certainly make sure that the goals are communicated to your team and that you're focused on those goals for that particular meeting. I can tell you that SOARs are going to be more attracted to your committee and want to serve if they feel like every time they go to your meetings, they're productive and that things are ultimately getting done and that it's not raggedy or not organized. And having relevant and productive agenda items, that's certainly going to help. And what I have done in the past is I have really talked to maybe seasoned SOARs or other people who have served in that role. And I looked at what they did for their agenda and how they flowed. And while I may tweak it to fit my own leadership style, it certainly helps to make sure you're not trying to reinvent the wheel while also being productive. Now, this one is really important, making sure that you keep complete and accurate meeting minutes. Full disclosure, this is something that I'm continuing to work on, and I feel like it's an opportunity for growth for me. But it really is important for you. Make sure that you keep track of members who are present. When it comes to our point system, when it comes to reporting, that information is imperative for our documentation. And one thing that you want to make sure you do is At the conclusion of your meetings, make sure you send those meeting minutes to the Basilisk and, if appropriate, to the program chairman. I'm sure you all have heard of situational awareness. This is especially true for our leadership because Sora Erica Watson-Lee, our Madam Basilisk, is a superwoman, but she cannot clone herself. She can't be in multiple places at one time. And so when you send her those minutes, that gives her that situational awareness so she knows what's going on without having to be in multiple places. She can read that report and follow up with you regarding those minutes if she has any questions. So before I jump into the committee activities, I wanted to look at the chat to see what messages we have. I believe I saw something from Sora Angel. So Sora Angel states that per the standards manual, committees are to meet in October of the prior year with the exception of nominating, audits, and standards. Okay, so that's really good information. And then Sora Valencia also stated, Soras who just arrived, thank you for joining us. Please sign in here with your full name. So just a reminder, please, if you just signed in, to enter your name into the chat message so that we can record that. So moving on to committee activities. So for me, the way that I organize it is I have pre-event responsibilities, during the event, and post. And that has worked well. And I'm going to share with you what we believe is best practice. So prior to your event, there are a few things that you'll want to do and also keep in mind. First, you're going to want to submit your event information to public relations 30 days prior to the event. Now, one thing that I learned this year hosting the HBCU fair is that you have different folks for different tasks. So the technology committee is going to post the event to the chapter website, whereas your Ivy Leaf reporter is going to post the event to social media, so your Facebook flyers that you see online, Instagram. So now both are incredibly important for you to make sure to get that information out there, and so you want to make sure you send any information regarding that event to them prior to the event 30 days. And also, it's not listed on here, but one thing you also want to keep in mind is that our Basilisk has to approve any flyers that you create, the communication that's going to be sent out. So, information that you're sending to them, you need to make sure that you get cleared with the Basilisk as well. Also, prior to the event, when you're planning, it is so helpful when you pair new Soras with seasoned Soras. It helps the newer Soras to not be so overwhelmed, whether they're new to Alpha Kappa Alpha or maybe a new transfer to our chapter. Pairing them with a seasoned member of Psi Theta Omega is certainly helpful, but to help them just become a part of the committee and to feel like it's a good fit. But then it also helps the seasoned Soras to provide that information to them so that when they move into that role of leadership, it's not so overwhelming. And so, Adrian, I saw that you had your hand raised. Did you have a question? Do you want to type it into the chat message? And so while you're typing that into the chat message, I'm going to go ahead and move to during and post. So now during the event,
40722260024 is not available. At the tone, please record your message. When you have finished recording, you may hang up or press 1 for more options.
Can someone please mute their phone? I'm not really sure what that was about. My apologies. So during the event, we all know that things get hectic, and this is where you're at high risk for, certain things to get dropped just because a lot is going on. And so during the event, this is where you certainly want to make sure that you use your committee members. You use the chapter. Our Soras, one thing that I love about Psi Theta Omega is that when we see a Sora in need, we are going to jump in and figure out what we can do to provide support. So use that support. A few things that you want to keep in mind is you want to task someone with keeping track of the sign-in sheet. There are many times where you start strong and you have someone sitting there, but as things get busy, you don't have one person whose dedicated task is to keep track of that. And sometimes that documentation is lost or accidentally thrown away. Another thing that you want to also do is make sure that you give someone the task of the event surveys. Those surveys are incredibly important for reporting, especially at the end of the year. And so when you give someone that task that's not yourself as that co-chairman or that chairman, it just helps to give that person a role, and then it also helps you to make sure that you can focus on other things that may be needed. And Sora Valencia is going to talk to you all about, keeping a level head and communicating with your team during the event, so I'm going to save that for her. Again, I'm just discussing the logistics. So now post-event, this is a huge one, submitting your receipt. So now we all know that the deadline is 90 days. However, best practice shows that you really should be submitting your receipts 30 days prior or 30 days after the event. This will help with making sure that there aren't any gaps in your financials, that everything is matching, and it gives you that time that if you need to go back and make sure that you don't need to submit another receipt or something's missing, you have that time. And certainly at the end of the year, November, December, you're not scrambling to try to make sure that everything is up to date. Now, completing your activity report. So I certainly want to give kudos to our technology committee. I feel like we have come a long way with submitting our activity reports. And this is an area where I feel that Member Planet is going to be your best friend. And if you feel like you're struggling with it or maybe there's an issue, certainly reach out to the technology committee so that you can figure out how to best use it. And so, Tiffany, I saw that your hand was raised as well. I never got the question from Sora Adrian, so I'm not sure if that's an issue. But Sora, Tiffany, what I'm going to do is just take you off of mute so that you can give your statement.
Okay. Can you hear me, sorry, Erica?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to highlight that we may have operating committee chairmen, and so they necessarily would not do a event report that goes to the program chairman. I just want to make sure for those who are on the call, on the webinar, that the program committee chairman, they do a report, but that report, like membership or leadership, for example, I don't do an end-of-the-year report that goes to the program chairman. I just wanted to highlight the difference.
Oh, good. Good catch. Thank you. Now, hosting post-event discussions with your committee members, I feel like this is critical, especially if there was a lot going on during that event and you weren't able to really connect with your team because everyone was busy. Is really important for a number of reasons, but I would say probably the most important reason.
You have reached the maximum time permitted for recording your message. If you are satisfied with your message, press 1. To listen to your message, press 2. To erase and re-record, press 3.
I am not sure why that's doing that. So
are you still there?
I apologize.
You have reached the maximum time permitted for recording your message. If you are satisfied with your message, press 1. To listen to your message, press 2. To erase and re-record, press 3.
I'm not really sure why it's doing that.
Are you still there? You have reached the maximum time permitted for recording your message. If you are satisfied with your message, press 1. To listen to your message, press 2. To erase and re-record, press 3.
Sorry, Erica, there are some sorors who joined after you muted.
Sorry, you're having trouble. Your message has been sent. Goodbye.
Okay. Yes, as a reminder, sorors, please go ahead, Sora Valencia.
I'm sorry. I was just saying that there were some sorors who joined after you muted the sorors who were on the call initially. So if we can go ahead and mute the sorors who joined after you did the first round of muting so that we can try to avoid this going forward.
Good idea. Let me go back. And sorors, if you could, please mute your phones. I'm going to go in and try to manually mute everyone. Okay. So going back to hosting a discussion with your committee members, there are a number of reasons, but certainly because you aren't able to really have that moment at the event, you want to make sure you have that discussion with committee members. One, you want to talk about what went well. You know, if it turns into an event that's so successful it becomes an annual event, you certainly want to hold on to the formula if it was something that went well. But you also want to make sure you talk about opportunities for growth. And, you know, we can even use our webinar that we're hosting right now as an example. There are certain things that we're going to take from this for our next webinar. And that is just the nature of our events. But the good thing about us, and when you're a true leader, is you're aware of that. And so, you know, in my profession, we call it a hot wash, and we talk about everyone's different roles and what they would like to see happen at the next event and things that they can avoid or how they can be proactive so that they can avoid that bump in the road again. And so whether that's at your next committee meeting, you certainly want to make sure that I would say at least by the next committee meeting, you have that post-event discussion with your committee members, just so you can make sure that everyone is on the same page and just get that communication from them. Now, moving on to reporting to the executive board. So a few things that you want to keep in mind, and I'm sure that we're all aware, you want to submit the report prior to the deadline. I know this is sometimes it's easier said than done, but it really is crucial for the agenda that's being created, for us to get an understanding. And in the event that Madam Basilisk needs to follow up with you regarding maybe something that was on that report for clarification or what have you, there's enough time to have that discussion prior to the actual meeting. One thing to keep in mind, if you would like to be on the agenda, you will need to first report at the executive committee meeting. I've seen it, and I'm probably guilty of it of myself, of doing a last-minute ask to please, put me on the agenda, but I didn't follow the proper protocol, or, or some of us may be guilty of that. Again, it goes back to having that proper flow of communication so we don't have those bumps in the road. And so in order to do that, you certainly want to make sure you submit the report prior to the deadline. Now, one thing that I can certainly credit my co-chairs with, and I'm just bragging on Target One, I know it's a program committee, but Sora Beverly and Sora Ashley, they both are really good. If I'm struggling to get that report in on time, I will send them a text, say, hey, can I send you the content and you upload it, or you send this information into the executive board, and they do it without hesitation. So I would say the underlying thing here, if you feel like it's a barrier for you to reach that deadline, rely on your co-chairs and even rely on your committee members. That's what they're there for, and they would like to help. Now, presenting at the executive committee meeting, I will say you want to be clear. You want to talk about any particular events or needs that you have, any motions or any concerns that you may have. You want to make sure you communicate that at the executive committee meeting. They're going to be the ones that provide that feedback to you prior to chapter meeting. And again, it helps with that flow of communication. The information that you give here is going to be the information that you also give at chapter meeting. But I would say the big difference here is the feedback that you get at executive committee meeting to go back to your committee and revise whatever needs to be, updated or edited is going to be important for your team. And so you certainly want to keep that in mind. And I say that to say that you want to make sure you get to the meat and potatoes of your report. You want to be concise. This is not the time to talk about your vision for 5 years from now. It's not the time to talk about, 2 or 3 meetings that have passed. You want to be clear and concise in what you need and what needs to be reported for that particular meeting. Now, reporting to chapter meeting, similar to executive committee, you want to make sure that you prepare the report. Now, one thing that you want to keep in mind here is you do need to be prepared to make a motion, and it needs to be done so properly. And so I know when we get into the etiquette and when we talk about protocol, there's a certain way that it needs to be done. And I'm just going to say fair warning, you probably will be corrected if it's not done so in the correct manner at chapter meeting. It can be a very intimidating process. I know most people are not fans of public speaking. So one thing to overcome that is, again, talk to seasoned soars who have done it. Maybe talk to the person who was in that role prior to you taking on that role, and they will be more than happy to share any pearls of wisdom that they may have for you. Now, I spoke to Sora Erica about this, and she gave me some really good feedback about soars making sure that the information that they give at chapter meeting is relevant. So this means this is not the time for you to report on your committee's last meeting at chapter. We don't need to talk about who was at the last conference call, every single item that was discussed. You want to make sure that you provide information regarding the next event, or even if it's an event that's maybe 2 or 3 months down the road, if you feel like soars need to prepare for it, maybe financially or save the date, then certainly you can provide that information. And then another item that you want to make sure you give at chapter meeting is the date and time of your next committee meeting. A lot of SOARs, you may or may not have noticed, but they will write that information down. And even if they're not on your committee, but they're interested in maybe that particular event, they'll try to log in and see how they can help. So it's just another great way to get SOARs on your team and to assist with whatever your event or whatever your activity that's going on. So ultimately, what is your mission as chairman? You have a few roles, and these are really critical roles. You want to, one, plan the committee meetings. It's going to boil down to you being organized, having that calendar, making sure you send out that information. I don't know. I just heard someone. Does someone have a question? If not, SOARs, please remember to mute your phones. Make sure you prepare and distribute your activity reports in a timely manner. One thing that I wanted to note here is, remember, you are the one that's serving as the liaison between your committee and that executive board. Your entire committee is not going to sit on that phone call for e-board. You are the one that's going to communicate the needs. So whether it's something related to getting funding for an activity or a particular item that's needed, it's going to come to you. It's going to come down to you being that person to serve as that voice. And so if your committee is having some barriers, or maybe there are some issues that they're facing, you want to keep in mind that you're serving as the voice for that committee for ultimately that activity to be completed in a great way. And I also wanted to point out that you want to communicate needs to your bacillus, your program chairman if, relevant, and other operating committees. I know that our chapter is one that is big on collaborating, but you can't collaborate if you don't communicate. And so you want to make sure that you communicate that needs to your bacillus. And one thing I love about our Madam Bacillus, SOAR Erica Watson-Lee, is she is very quick to respond. She is also very innovative. And so if you go to her, there are many times where I've asked her a question, and also my program chairman, or our program chairman rather, SOAR LaTanya, questions about, things, and they have really brought solutions that have helped our target go to the next level. And so certainly this is the time that you want to use your SOARs for that support. So committee members, so for those who are on the call serving as a committee member, you also want to make sure you understand the program expectations. It is okay to ask questions. If you're not clear on something, or if you're not clear about the vision or the goal for that particular committee, it's okay to ask and make sure that everyone is on the same page. Certainly, we want to make sure you attend meetings and program activities. That goes without saying. But most importantly, assist in designing and delivering that activity. If you have an idea and you would like to share it, or if you have a solution for a particular issue, share that. It is okay. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean every idea is going to be, acted upon, but that's okay. A lot of times committee chairmen feel the pressure to take everything on, but when you get that support from committee members and get those ideas and also get those who are willing to act on the plans, you are going to create a recipe for success. And so with that, I'm going to give the microphone over to SOAR Valencia so she can talk about motivating your committee.
Thank you, SOAR Erica. Good evening, SOARs. This is SOAR Valencia, and we're now going to talk about some of the rough patches that we can face and how to avoid those rough patches, and also what to do when we hit those rough patches. So in order to try to avoid those rough patches, we start with trying to motivate our committee. As committee chairs, we have to create and maintain that team spirit. We have to believe in everything that we do. We have to believe in everything that our committee does, because if we as the chairman believe, obviously we can go ahead and get our members along on board with them believing as well. We have a lot of programs going on in PTO throughout the year, and every committee is a very, very valuable committee to PTO. So what we do know is that excitement breeds excitement. So we have to create and maintain that team spirit. We also have to encourage creativity. When we have programs coming up, we have to be attentive. We have to listen to our committee members. And what I mean by that is we have to allow our committee members to be creative and think outside of the box. just because it's working one way or it worked this way last year or we did it a certain way 5 years ago doesn't mean it can't be improved, doesn't mean it can't be expanded upon. There's always room for growth. So we always have to encourage our team, our committee, and we always have to listen to them and encourage them to come up with new ideas. And if they have those new ideas, always try to think of a way to implement those ideas if they're beneficial to the overall goal. And with that said, we have to empower everyone. Again, it goes back to motivating. We have to accept that everyone comes to the table with different ideas. Everyone comes to the table with different strengths, different weaknesses, and we're going to talk about those very shortly. But one of the things that I like to do when it comes to empowering is send some motivation and some inspiration, because one of the things that we have to remember is that we all have a life outside of our beloved AKA, and we all have a life outside of PTO. We have duties, we have other obligations, and sometimes we just need that extra push, especially when we have a lot going on outside of PTO and we're really tired. We don't feel like we can give just another minute to our AKA duties. Sometimes we just need that extra push to say, you know what, I need to give this one more hour and I can do it, or I need to give this one more program next weekend, I can do this. So as long as our committee chairs are excited and they're empowering everyone, that's the way to get your whole committee on board. Part of also getting our committee on board is effective listening. When we have our committee meetings, it's very important, especially for our committee chairs, to pay attention. You know, I understand we have to facilitate our meetings efficiently, but in a sisterly way, we have to keep the meeting moving. We have to facilitate effectively and efficiently, but we have to pay attention. We can't cut each other off or cut other members of our committee off. We have to make them feel as though they bring value, they belong on this committee, and we always have to be sisterly about it, meaning we can't put forth any type of judgment against anyone or with regard to their ideas. We always have to enforce a judgment-free zone, and we always have to allow for time for reflection. You know, don't quickly shoot down any ideas. Someone may say something that right now might sound a little off or a little crazy at the moment, but we can't shoot it down. Instead of shooting something down quickly, as effective leaders, we have to take a step back as chairman, and we have to think about what that person has said. We have to respect it, not judge them for it, and we have to try to understand where that person is coming from. So a little bit of reflection time is always good, even if it means we have to say, you know what, Soror, that is actually a great idea. Let's go ahead and maybe take the next week or two and reflect upon that idea. And then when we reconvene, let's go ahead and discuss it. That will give you, as the committee chair, time to basically digest what that committee member has said or has brought up or suggested. And then you can come back to the table with something constructive so that that committee member doesn't feel like their idea was not heard or fell on deaf ears or was just completely shot down. You have a time to take a step back, reflect upon it, and try to implement it. We can go to the next one. Thank you. Another part of effective leading is gratitude. When I lead a committee, I try to develop the 5 love languages for my committee, and these are 5 that I like to use. The first is kudos. I like to go ahead and give a shout-out to whomever deserves that shout-out. Because if we don't appreciate the people on our committee, guess what? They're not going to want to work for you again if you don't appreciate them. Also, random acts of kindness. They don't have to do something great on the committee for you to show them some love, as well as positive feedback. Whether you utilize someone's idea or you don't utilize their idea, always give your committee members positive feedback because, again, it's all about being sisterly. We don't want any negativity on our committees. Then also, I like to send out weekly encouragement. Whether I love Vince Lombardi quotes. Everyone who knows me knows that. If it's a Vince Lombardi quote that I send out or a quote from another author or another famous person that someone may recognize, or even a quote that I make up myself, any type of encouragement, I like to send weekly encouragement to my committee members because that lets them know, hey, look, we're all in this together. You're not by yourself. I may not know what's going on in your personal life every day, but I understand you're juggling 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 or 6 hats. We're all in this together. Here's your encouragement. 2 of the most powerful words we can use, and I have to admit, it really bugs me that we don't say these 2 words enough, not just, you know, as sorors, but even outside of AKA in our workplaces and in our families and in our personal lives. Those 2 words are thank you. We just don't say those words enough. Those are two of the most powerful words that we can use when it comes to our committee members or even the people in our lives. Just a simple thank you is all that it takes for someone to feel appreciated, for them to feel that level of gratitude that they're looking for. Also, when it comes to that gratitude, cultivate that habit from day one. Don't start on day one, trying to go through this, that, or the other of what your committee needs to accomplish. Start that habit of gratitude from day one. At that very first meeting, thank everyone on your committee for being a part of that committee, for signing up to be a part of that committee, for being on that call, or for being at that conference table or at that restaurant for that meeting with you. And express positivity. Things are going to go wrong. It's inevitable. Things always go wrong. We don't want them to, but they do. But when things go wrong, we have to remain positive. That positivity that we started on the very first day, we have to carry that with us all throughout the year with our committees, even when things go wrong. Because when the chips fall, your committee members are going to be looking at you as the chairman. They're not going to be looking at each other. They're going to be looking at how you, the chairman and the co-chairman, how you're responding to whatever has gone wrong. And if you're responding with anger or with negativity, they're going to see that, and that's going to bounce off of you and onto them. Next slide, please. There's no I in team. I love this one. Often, and thankfully we don't have much of this in PTO, but often when it comes to teamwork, a lot of people just want to take over, and they want to do things their way. But we have to understand that as chairman and co-chairman, we have to foster collaboration. We have to make everyone on that team feel as though that they are a part of that team. One of the things that I like to tell people when we're having these types of discussions is don't go into the takeover spirit. You have to avoid the takeover spirit. A lot of us are type A and some type A++ personalities, but we have to avoid always wanting things our way. We have to trust that the people on our team, the people on our committee, we're all college-educated women. We have to trust that whatever we delegate or whatever responsibility someone assumes, that they're going to do it and they're going to get it done right. Now, it may not be exactly how you envisioned in your head as the chairman or co-chairman, but we have to trust that our sorors are going to be sisterly at all times and get things done. Because remember, it is not about us. It is not about any of us individually, so we can't micromanage. This is about service to all mankind. It is about our community. So again, it's not about us. We can't sit there in a committee meeting and just have useless conversation because the committee chair or the co-chair running the meeting wants to talk about their day. That's not what it's about. Everybody has other obligations. So we have to avoid these useless meetings when we're sitting there talking about things outside of the committee or outside of the committee's goals and responsibilities. Of course, we all want to make sure that we're okay, and we want to be sisterly about it, but we can't spend an entire conference call I, because it is about the team. It is about service to all mankind. Again, we can't have that takeover spirit. We can't micromanage. We have to be of service, but we also have to be sisterly about it. We can go to the next slide, please. Now, things will come up, and we know that. We will have little bumps in the road, a few bruises here and there. And that's when we have to have crucial conversations. As chairman and co-chairman, again, your committee members, they're looking to you to make sure things run as smoothly as possible and as effectively as possible and as efficiently as possible. So when you reach those road bumps or you get a few nicks and bumps and bruises, you have to have a crucial conversation. It may not be with the whole committee. It may just be with one or two people. It may just be with maybe 4 or 5 people. But you have to sit down and have those conversations when issues or problems do come up. And when you sit down and have these conversations, of course, the main goal is to always be sisterly, nothing less than a sisterly conversation. And when you have that conversation, don't beat around the bush. We're all adults, all college-educated women. Be clear about the issue. Focus on the issue. But as chairman and co-chairman, when you walk into that meeting, always have an objective in mind. This is what I want to walk away from this meeting with. I want everyone to be on the same page. I want everyone to feel loved. I want everyone to feel that they're a part of this sisterhood, and I want everyone to feel that they're a part of this committee. So focus solely on the issue and adopt an open mindset. Too often, it's easy to go into meetings with just a closed mindset. We only want to see our point of view or another person's point of view. We don't want to look at the whole picture, the big picture, as we like to say. And again, keep it comfortable. When we have these crucial conversations, they don't have to be a confrontation. They should be a conversation. And there is a difference. So we have to learn how to manage emotions. Even if you're feeling some kind of way about something, you still have to manage those emotions, because at the end of the day, we don't ever want anyone to walk away from any of our crucial conversations feeling some kind of way, upset or with hatred in their heart, dislike, or anything else. We want to manage emotions and only show love when we have these crucial conversations. And again, walk away having achieved that objective that we had in mind from the very beginning. Our most valuable asset that we always have to keep in mind in all of our dealings as chairman and co-chairman and as sorors in general is to preserve our relationships and our sisterhood, because that is our top priority. Next slide, please. Communication is key. I hear a lot of people, especially, on social media, we'll see people write on their social media boards that they just don't have time. Life got in the way. I can honestly tell you there's no such thing as life got in the way. That is the most ridiculous response to anything ever. All of us have time to make time, whether it's 1 minute, whether it's 30 seconds. We can make time to make sure that our committee is okay. When it comes to the communication, number one, make time to check on your members. Again, it only takes 10 seconds to send a text message. Hey, you good? Yep. Okay, cool. 10 seconds. That's all that took. When you have your committee meetings, yes, we do a lot of phone conferences, but a better option is face-to-face. And I know a lot of times with our busy schedules, work, families, and other things, other organizations going on, it's hard to always have those face-to-face conferences. But if you can try at least once or twice a year to have a face-to-face committee meeting, that would be awesome in terms of getting your committee all on the same page, developing that sisterly bond with everyone on the committee, and do it over lunch, do it over dinner, do it over brunch, or just sit down at a library in one of the rooms and have a meeting. And remember, delivery is always key. We want to be sisterly at all times because we are committed. We're committed to success, and we're committed to growth. Next slide, please. When I think of lead, because that's what our committee chairmen and co-chairmen are, we are leaders. And I like to break things down. So to me, lead means learn, encourage, acknowledge, and delegate. Learn, be open, be flexible, don't get stuck in a rut, and remember that change is not overrated. Change is okay. A lot of people are scared of it. We can't fear it. Encourage, we have to motivate. And remember that our attitude is everything. We have to be available as leaders. And we have to understand that dictating is not encouraging. Micromanaging is not encouraging. That's how we drive our committee members off. We have to be open, and we have to acknowledge everyone's side of everything. Everyone has something to give to every conversation that we have as committee meetings, during our committee meetings. Acknowledge. We have to acknowledge that we want success. So, you know what? We're going to have failures, but we're not going to dwell on those failures. And when we succeed, or even if we try something and we fail, we're still going to reward. As committee chairman and co-chairman, we still have to reward our committee members and not play favorites. We also have to delegate. We have to involve everyone. We have to ask if people have questions, but we also have to lead by example. If you want your committee to work, guess what? You've got to work too. You can't just show up when you want to show up, but we as leaders, we have to work too. And we have to work just as hard, if not twice as hard, as everyone on our committee, because, again, we want to lead by example. And the only way to get our committee members to trust us, or the people that we're leading to trust us, is that we lead by example. Next slide, please. Like I said, failures happen, mistakes happen, but it's okay to make mistakes. Mistakes are inevitable. Each program that we have in PTO, whether it's a program, we do Pink Pearl Affair every year, but we do something a little different every year. There may be times that we do something that works. There may be times that we do something that doesn't work. But we have to keep an open mind that each program is a learning experience. And nobody on our committee, no committee chairman, no co-chairman, nobody on the dais, nobody in the chapter, nobody is perfect. And we have to understand and accept that. Mistakes are going to happen. But when they happen again, we have to be sisterly. We have to keep a positive attitude, and we have to be encouraging to all of our team members. Next slide, please. Again, I love quotes, so I will say that a leader sees greatness in other people. He nor she can be much of a leader if all she sees is herself, and that's a quote by one of our sorors, Sora Maya Angelou. In that regard, I do want to mention, before we take any questions, that we do have another webinar that is coming up, so we will announce that at the end of this program. But if you have any questions now, please go ahead and ask. We're all ears.
And Soros, you are on mute, so feel free to use the chat so you can type your message in the chat box. You can also raise your hand and I'll take your mic off of mute. And Sora Erica, while we're waiting on anyone to chime in with questions, Sora Erica, did you have any comments or thoughts?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time to join. I did task all committee chairmen and co-chairmen to participate. If they didn't, this is recorded, so I will be letting them know to go and look at this. What I want to make sure we walk away with is to collaborate as much as possible. Many hands make light work. So we want to make sure that we are utilizing as many resources as possible. Another thing I want to make sure is that we keep our calendar of events and activities current. And there have been some committees I've asked to go back and look at what else they can collaborate with other committees on, what they can remove from the calendar, because what we want to make sure we do is that we're not stretching chapter members too thin. We know that there are a certain group of sorors that we can pretty much depend on being at most things. Then we have other sorors that come to as much as possible. And then we have some sorors that may not be able to be as present as we would like them to be. So we don't want to stretch our resources, and I mean physical resources, too thin. The other part of that is just making sure that you paid attention during Erica Martin's section related to report and timeliness and being clear and concise so that we can be as efficient as possible. I have moved forward this year with putting time frames on reporting at chapter meetings to keep our meetings moving along and to make sure SARs focus on the pertinent topics that they need to relate to the chapter. I think that is going well, and I will continue to do that. So that's even more reason why we need to make sure we are presenting the information that needs to be presented to the chapter. Again, we don't need to know about your last committee meeting and how many people were present or who was present. That goes in your report that is physically submitted, but that doesn't need to be reported, if everyone understands. I want to thank Sarah Joylene for allowing us to utilize her system, and Sarah Erica and Sarah Valencia for presenting. I think we got some good information related to the technical, logistical part of being a committee chairman or endeavors to become a committee chairman or co-chairman. And then we got some of the other side, which is important to keep your committee engaged and motivated and feeling appreciated. So thank you both very much for that. And then I will mute my mic and allow anyone else to ask any questions they may have. I do want to clarify relating to the meeting. What Sarah Erica reported on for January is I asked, and I will continue to ask all committee chairs to schedule a meeting for their committee meetings in January of every year so that we can start the year off ready to move forward with our programs and activities. I believe what Sarah Angel was speaking of was like the pre-planning meeting that Sarah Roberta did, and maybe some other past Basile may have done in their administration. And we will continue to do planning meetings for the upcoming year. But the meeting that Sergeant Erica was reporting on in her presentation is the first meeting of the year, which I am asking all committees to do in January, not February, but January of every year. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
The only other thing that I want to add as we wrap this up, because I don't see any questions coming through, is SOARs, let's just all remember as chairman and co-chairman, members of the dais, leaders in general, whether it's in PTO, aka at work or in our families or anywhere else. One of the biggest things I would like for everyone to take away from the presentation is that we're in this together. None of us, we're not in this alone, we're all in this together, and you build the best relationships when you work with everyone instead of against anyone. So let's always remember that. And if we remember that and we remember to stay sisterly, I think that all of us can have very, 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 very great relationships with our committee members and with SOARs as a whole.
Certainly. Thank you so much, Sora Valencia. So really quickly before we close, SOARs, please save the date for So You Want to Run for Office. That webinar will take place on September 12th at 7 p.m., so please mark your calendars. If you have any questions after today's webinar, please feel free to send an email, and we will work to try to get an answer for you in a timely manner. So again, we want to thank you all so much for attending tonight's webinar. We are going to end the recording at this point, and it will be uploaded to Member Planet. Thank you all so much. Good night.